We're going to go ahead and start off with Afghanistan, the latest that's going on there. So, according to Politico, U.S. officials provided Taliban with names of Americans, Afghan allies, and others to evacuate. So, these are the people that have maybe you might hear the term CIVs. That means special immigration visa. I know sometimes people use a lot of language that, beltway language or internal language. So, those special immigration visas, those are for people who helped us during the war. They need to evacuate. They need to get out. They get special access, and they kind of can skip the line a little bit. So those are special immigration visas. We also still have some Americans that are still left in Afghanistan, and we also have other Afghans that were wanting to get out of there. So there are others that maybe have typical green cards or visas that are visiting in Afghanistan. Really bad time, by the way, to go and visit or to go on a school trip. There was some reports that we've been hearing about people that decided to go and visit family members in Afghanistan. Like, why would you choose this summer of all summers to go to Afghanistan when you knew the United States was pulling out and wasn't going to be there anymore? I mean, it just seems like maybe they weren't paying attention to the news. Maybe they really believed that, oh no, the Afghan forces are going to go ahead and hold the place for a while. Maybe they thought this is our last chance to go visit because the Taliban are coming. So we got to go this summer before the Taliban get there because the U.S. is pulling out their troops. And so now's the time to go to Afghanistan. Maybe that's what they were thinking, but it just seems so bizarre that anybody would plan a trip to Afghanistan during this summer. There was also a school, a bunch of kids and their parents from San Diego are in Afghanistan, trapped. I think they also were there to visit family. They were actually Afghan refugees, I believe, from previous waves of refugees, and they went back to go and visit. I mean, again, it's like, why are you there right now? Why did you pick now to go back to Afghanistan? Not a good idea, guys. But nonetheless, all hope might not be lost because the U.S. officials in Kabul have given the Taliban a list of names of American citizens, green card holders, Afghan allies, those who have special immigration visas. They gave them a list and they said, listen, we're leaving and we want these people to have freedom of access to get out of the country. And the Taliban has said, okay. So this has obviously caused a lot of controversy because on one hand, we've got obviously that feels from just, intuitively that feels like, what the heck? You gave a list of Americans and Afghan allies, like the very people who were fighting you. You gave a list of these people to the enemy and you expect them to grant them safe passage out? Do you really think that's going to happen? So that is understandably a big concern regarding this, especially if the Taliban is looking to punish those who fought against them. If they're looking for retaliation of some kind, or if they just say, look, you broke a law and now you're going to have to pay for that law, and that law was that you went against your countrymen. That certainly is a giant risk. However, on the flip side, the Taliban really have been going through this PR campaign since they rolled into Kabul to try to get the world to understand that they're different. We're dealing with a new generation of Taliban, and they're not nearly as radical. They let girls go to school. They want women in the government. They told all their women to stay home because not all the men know how to handle you just yet, and we need to go through some training. So everybody stay home and stay safe because we don't want there to be any squabbles or incidences with some of these fighters who've never been in the city. They're kind of like the farm boy Taliban fighters, and they still have very, very traditional viewpoints. And so some of the Taliban leaders were saying, we just think that women should stay home for a little bit, not because we're telling you to stay home indefinitely. We're telling you to stay home because we got some work to do when it comes to how these men treat you. That's kind of interesting. Taliban leaders have been going around the media circuit, actually sitting down for interviews with women reporters and granting female reporters access on the streets. We saw this with CNN and other outlets, and so it's really interesting, this big PR campaign that the Taliban are going through right now. And part of me really wonders if this was part of a deal that was struck in secret with the Taliban. Part of me wonders if the administration didn't flub this up as much as we think they did. They're just not willing to tell us the truth. Surprise, right? That they're not going to tell us the truth. But obviously, when it came to, we know Trump wanted to sit down with the Taliban, invited them to Camp David. That was terrible optics. Nobody wanted to see the Taliban in the United States sitting at Camp David. And so that ended up getting called off. But ultimately, Trump was trying to negotiate a peace deal with the Taliban. One of the criticisms of that was he didn't bring in the Afghan military or the Afghan government. Well, if the Trump administration didn't bring in the Afghan government, my guess is because they knew the Afghan government was going to collapse in a minute. They knew that they were not going to be the governing force of Afghanistan. They knew it was going to be the Taliban. And a lot of me wonders, now that we're seeing how things are unfolding, how the Taliban have reacted, what they're saying, the fact that the government gave them a list of these names, it makes me sort of now think that the Biden administration also did a deal with the Taliban and have not disclosed that deal to the American public. That they probably did. It's looking more and more likely that they said, listen, this is what we'll do. We're going to leave. And we're going to leave some of our equipment behind that I suppose you can use in order to help fight ISIS. And you've got to let us have safe passage out of Kabul. Let us give passage to the people to the airport so that we can get them out. And clearly that must, some people are saying, well, no, it's the Taliban did this because they want to be recognized on the international stage. Well, the first step to being recognized on the international stage would be, I would imagine, sitting down with the U.S. government, or at least communicating with the U.S. government in some way to make sure that there's an understanding that everything's going to be fine, that, the Taliban are going to take control. They want to be recognized by the international community. They need access to humanitarian funds. They need access to their own money. So it's just looking increasingly likely that there was this deal done and that the Taliban is going to have some work to do when it comes to fighting ISIS in their own country. And that clearly the United States is going to continue, like I mentioned before, an over-the-horizon war inside of Afghanistan. So you can expect to see continued drone strikes, continued targeted over-the-horizon counterterrorism strikes in Afghanistan, but we'll be fighting alongside Taliban rather than against them. And that's not totally a shift. In the past, the U.S. didn't really work directly with Taliban in order to fight ISIS, but was hovering around, knowing that both groups were interested in getting ISIS out of the country or eliminating the threat of ISIS in some way, shape, or another, and was working sort of collaboratively without being overtly collaborative. However, I believe going forward, this might become more overt, and it'll be interesting to see how this shakes out in the media and how this. So what's interesting about this in particular is that Trump started that. So that was done on Republican watch, and that is something that, had Trump been able to continue it, that the Republican base would have gone along with it and said, well, it is what it is. We fought a war, we lost a war. The Taliban are now in control, but we did a peace deal with them. Obviously Trump was going to try to make it look like the U.S. was getting something for it, so it didn't look like a complete loss with tail tucked between our legs. So it would have kind of facilitated some sort of optics in order to make it less painful that we lost this 20-year war. And the Taliban would take control of Afghanistan. So the Republican base would have been totally for that had Trump been the one to continue it. What'll be really interesting to see is that because Biden is the one who, so Trump started it, and Biden's the one continuing it, it'll be interesting to see what happens if that were to come to light. If it comes out that the Biden administration did sort of do this off the books deal with the Taliban, saying, all right, we're going to recognize you as an official government. As long as you guys can meet these certain parameters, then you can be recognized as an official government. We won't block you from your money. We'll ensure that you're allowed to have humanitarian funds, and you're getting control of Afghanistan, and we're just going to have to accept it. And you're going to be, at some point in the near future, recognized as a legitimate government. With Biden being the one to continue that, I think a lot of Republicans would switch back into warmonger mode real quick. They would say, oh my gosh, he did a deal with the Taliban. He sold us out. And now look, now we're giving names to the Taliban for safe passage for all of these people. And how dare they? I mean, they're already switching on their narrative. But had it been Trump, I think that the base would have been like, well, it is what it is. We can't stay in war forever, and we lost, and we got to hand it over. So it's really interesting how quickly these narratives can shift. It's unfortunate in my mind that this happened under a Democratic president, because traditionally, now I get it, the warmonger establishment is on both sides of the aisle. But traditionally, the Democrat base, the voters, are less inclined to continue these wars, especially a war that was started under Bush. So had this been done fully under Trump, I think we would see a safer and potentially a more true end to the war against the Taliban in Afghanistan. I think that there would be, there were definitely those Republican warmongers who didn't like the optics of it no matter what. And so they definitely pushed back, and they did, and they didn't. And so they prevented the Camp David meeting from happening. But nonetheless, it's kind of a shame when a war ends under a Democrat. It's better when a war ends under a Republican, even though the outcome's no different as far as, a lot of factors on it. It just, the mentality of the public matters, and what they're calling for and what they push for matters. So this is going to be interesting moving forward to see how this all shakes out. But it does look like the Taliban is wanting to be recognized on the international stage. They are wanting to move forward. They've done interviews saying, when asked by British reporters, for example, what is your relationship now with the United States? The Taliban spokesperson answered saying, let the past be the past. We want to move forward. I think that's really interesting. They're saying that, and it almost sounds like they're saying it because they know that they have some security in saying that there was already some sort of deal done. So I'm not really too upset about this list being given to the Taliban at this point. I do think that the Afghan ally, I think the Americans will always be able to get out of the country. I am worried, though, however, for the Afghans who have visas. And it is unclear if the Taliban really will let them out of the country. They are worried about a brain drain. And so, it's possible that they say, look, we're not going to give you the death sentence, but you're going to have to spend a couple of years in a prison for what you did fighting against your countrymen. Maybe that's something that they will do. That is certainly something that was done in South Vietnam. My grandfather went to one of these camps after Saigon fell to the north. So it's possible that they do something like that. It's possible that they just say, let bygones be bygones, I suppose. And now you live under Taliban rule, and you're just going to have to accept it and move on. But we'll see how this pans out. But I'm starting to suspect that there was potentially a deal done that we don't know about. And that is why the U.S. government feels safe enough to give a list of names over to the Taliban. If you like what you see here, please be sure to subscribe, like, share, do all of that good stuff. Also, please join me on my locals community. That is where I do a couple of live streams a week, also give some behind the scenes information of what's going on with the show, sneak peeks into even just my personal life. Also, it's a great community where you can share articles with one another and communicate with one another. So it's a really cool place to gather and be for more information, to stay more involved. So join me in my locals community. That link is down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please be sure to email me if you have any questions or comments, kim@kimiverson.com.